Authentic is sponsored in whole by Voice of Prophecy.
What if the world, as you experience it, is not exactly the way you think it is? What if the evidence of your senses has been lying to you? And what if the things you hear and see as you make your way through life aren't actually real? Don't think that could happen? Stick around, because you're about to have an authentic experience.
Welcome to Authentic. Shawn Boonstra explores real existential questions about the meaning of your life and how you can live a genuine human existence. Listen every week right here on this station or on your favorite podcatcher. Here's Shawn with this week's episode of Authentic.
You know, I don't know if you're getting the same online ads that I am, but I keep getting these commercials for computer-generated voiceover services that allow you to narrate a video without actually having to use a voice actor. And I guess computerized voices are nothing particularly new because, well, maybe you remember this. The Chrysler Corporation actually introduced talking cars back in the 1980s, right about the time that Knight Rider was a really popular TV show. And these Chryslers had all these pre-recorded notifications like, please fasten your seatbelt, or a door is ajar, and a lot of other, well, naggy messages. And of course, as a kid, I thought that talking cars were pretty cool. But now maybe you've noticed you can't find them anywhere because talking cars have disappeared. It's been 40 years since they first hit the market. And my guess is that manufacturers found that people don't want their cars talking to them. There's just something about artificial voices and artificial people that doesn't sit well with most of us. You see, no matter how good you are at creating the illusion of human intelligence coming out of a machine, most of our efforts don't pass the consumer's sniff test, even though a lot of people can't really put their finger on why they don't like it. For example, sometimes you get a computer-generated voice answering your phone calls, and most of us don't like that. Back in 2018, Google unveiled a new service that actually calls businesses for you to make appointments. So if you need a haircut, let's say, you just push a button and Google calls the hairdresser and lines up your appointment. And from what I gather, a lot of the people who took those calls couldn't tell it was a computer talking at them. Then, on the heels of that, Google introduced a virtual call center where they answer the phone for you and talk to your customers. And again, I've got to admit, these computer-generated voices were really pretty convincing, at least for a couple of minutes. For a few minutes, you might think you're talking to a real human being. But if you keep listening to those artificial voices, there's always a tell. There's always some little nuance that gives it away because human communication is very complex. And our brains have gotten good at picking up little details to help us interpret what people are saying. You see, we don't just communicate with words. We also communicate by using little inflections, or silences, or facial expressions, or hand gestures. And for computers to mimic all of that, well, they'd have to be able to read and interpret the emotional state of the listener. And that's not an easy task. So, at some point, when you're listening to computer-generated voices, you are going to hear the difference. The computer's going to get something wrong, ever so slightly, and that's going to make you feel just a little bit uncomfortable. It's a phenomenon we call the uncanny valley. There's just something about a phony person, a phony voice that triggers a very uncomfortable feeling in most of us. Now, on the phone, it's pretty easy to fool people because you can't actually see someone's facial expressions. But when you turn on video, your face, in essence, becomes your second voice. In fact, something like 80% of communication isn't done with words. When you and I talk through FaceTime or on Zoom, I can see the sparkle in your eye, or the wrinkle forming on your forehead, or the look of fear on your face when you tell me what just happened to you at the hospital. What I see adds a lot of meaning to what you say. And so far, we haven't been able to build a computer that can actually master the complete art of human communication. Because communication is very intuitive. It's a two-way street. Real human beings will change what they're saying or how they're saying it based on the visual feedback they get from somebody's face. And so far, a silicon chip doesn't know how to do that, at least not very well. Now, some visual artists and movie makers have caught on to this, and they're actually abandoning the idea of trying to use computer-generated people in their movies. They'd rather make cartoons, something that doesn't try to look like a real person because, well, audiences often reject the more realistic-looking characters. They don't like them. What we're discovering is that if you try to get too close, too much like a real person, it turns people off. They find it creepy. It's kind of like those Japanese robots that get really close to looking like real people. But when they start moving and talking, it gives you the willies because you can tell something's wrong. You might not know what it is, but you know something's wrong. That is the uncanny valley. Of course, some people are still working on this and they're getting closer and closer to creating a believable fake. When Google rolled out their artificial operators, for example, a lot of people were fooled. But still, there's a significant barrier to making fakes look really, really good. And that's the fact that the sheer volume of data that passes back and forth when you and I are talking is so massive that programmers have to anticipate millions of possibilities, and that's a pretty daunting job. So, of course, the next step is to teach computers to start learning so they can learn all the possibilities found in human exchanges, and then they could anticipate absolutely anything. So who knows? Maybe we'll get there someday. Maybe we'll build the perfect illusion, an artificial human that can actually fool all of us. Now, personally, I kind of doubt it. I could be wrong, but I doubt it. So, as I was saying, I've been getting these ads for a computer-generated voiceover service, and they tell me I can create instructional videos or sales presentations by using an artificial voice, and they insist that nobody will be able to tell. So who knows? Maybe someday I can do this show by having a computer-generated Shawn sit in this chair. Now again, I'm not very hopeful because when I listen to the samples from that service, I can tell the difference. So you can just call me skeptical. I'm not sure it's going to happen. Now, just a few weeks ago, I had this article pop up on my news feed, and it's talking about the dangers of deep fake videos. These are videos that put words into real people's mouths, words they never actually said, and some of them look pretty good. Maybe you saw that State Farm commercial where they made it look like a sportscaster back in 1998 was predicting stuff in the year 2020, and he was getting absolutely everything right. Of course, this never actually happened. It was a computer-generated fake. But I've got to admit, if you weren't really watching carefully, this one was pretty good. Now, I don't know if I would have fallen for it, honestly, because unfortunately, I already knew it was a fake before I watched it, so I was on high alert and I was being careful. I was watching for inconsistencies, and of course, because I was watching, I found them. But what if I didn't know in advance? What if I wasn't paying attention? What if I was watching this out of the corner of my eye while I was busy doing something else because, well, that's usually the way I watch TV? Who knows? I might have fallen for it. But I'll tell you what really bothers me. The possibility that people might use this kind of technology to persuade the public of things that never really happened. And sadly, I think there are people who would do this. There are people who will use this technology to put words in people's mouths in order to destroy those people and to sell us a lie. After all, even though we didn't have deep fake technology in the past, we still used print media and other modes of communication to run nationwide propaganda campaigns. The clearest example we have of that in recent history, of course, is the way that the Nazis or the Stalinists managed to distort reality through a deliberate campaign of misinformation. So we know that people will do this. We know that deepfakes can be very dangerous. In recent years, we've already seen deepfake artists put words into famous politicians' mouths, creating videos where they appear to be saying something they never did. And now we find ourselves standing on the front edge of a brand new problem. If somebody doesn't like who I am or what I say, And trust me, there's always somebody who doesn't like what I say. They could potentially ruin my life by manipulating a video and putting words in my mouth. Let's say someone wants a promotion at work, and they're afraid you might get it. So they sit at their computer and make a video where it sounds like you're bad-mouthing the boss. How do you defend yourself against something like that? You know, this is something that's already happening. Somebody made a video making it look like President Obama was cussing about President Trump, calling him rude names that I could never repeat on the air. It was a fake. Somebody did it to Mark Zuckerberg too. They made a video where it looked like he was saying he planned to manipulate the whole planet using Facebook. And if I'm perfectly straight with you, I kind of wanted to believe that one because Facebook's been rubbing my fur the wrong way for a long time. That's what makes these things so dangerous. If you come across a deepfake video of someone you don't like, you're going to want to believe it. So, of course, what in the world can you do about this? Well, I guess the first thing is to take everything you see with a grain of salt. I don't want to live like a cynic, and it would be nice to trust everybody, but that's getting harder to do. A world with deepfake technology is a world where conspiracy theorists are probably going to have a heyday. I mean, some of these guys are already trying to tell us that nobody ever landed on the moon and the world is flat, and now they might just have the technology to show you. So you've got to wonder what it's going to do to us if we all become distrustful and apprehensive all the time. And unfortunately, this new problem runs a whole lot deeper than some people think. I'll be right back to tell you why.
Life can throw a lot at us. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. But that's where the Bible comes in. It's our guide to a more fulfilling life. Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we've created the Discover Bible Guides to be your guide to the Bible. They're designed to be simple, easy to use, and provide answers to many of life's toughest questions. And they're absolutely free. Sign up at BibleStudies.com today and start your journey of discovery.
This is Authentic with Shawn Boonstra and the Voice of Prophecy.
Unfortunately, we now find ourselves living in a world where it's getting harder and harder to figure out if some things are actually real. We have a lot of manufactured reality in the 21st century, and the sheer volume of information pushed in your direction every single day, and the speed at which you are asked to absorb that information makes it impossible to carefully evaluate everything you hear and see. I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you watch too much TV, binge on it, it kind of leaves your brain in a bit of a fog. You plop yourself down on the couch and you watch a TV show over and over for a whole afternoon, and then when you're finished, and you try to do something intelligent like read a book, you find it really hard to concentrate. Now, this isn't exactly hard science, but some people think that the reason this happens, at least in part, is that all that information from the TV was being fed into your mind so quickly that you actually turned off your capacity for careful judgment. You just shut down your mental filters and let all the information come in. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist, and that's just my way of describing the process, but it's an undeniable fact that when you're presented with way too much information far too quickly, you do have a tendency to shut down. You just absorb stuff without thinking about it. So here we are, living in a time when we have more information than any other generation that's ever lived on this planet. Over the last couple of years, human beings have added 2.5 quintillion bytes of data to the internet every 24 hours. Just on Instagram, there are 95 million new photos every single day. It's a lot of information. And while you certainly don't even see a fraction of that personally, the amount of data that you are exposed to is unbelievable. So, of course, there's no way to absorb all of that critically. And what you do is filter the information. You pick and choose what you're going to expose your mind to. But unfortunately, your mind has a habit of preferring the information that already agrees with what you believe. That's called confirmation bias. Now, that's not a bad thing because it actually allows you to build a working model for how you're going to navigate the world. But sometimes what happens is that you're adding bad information to bad information, and you're actually confirming ideas that were never valid in the first place. Let me see if I can illustrate. Once upon a time, most of us believed that the Earth was the center of the solar system. And we had really bright people telling us this was true. People like Ptolemy, the great North African astronomer. And once we accepted the basic premise, it suddenly looked like all the data supported this idea. The Ptolemaic model of the solar system was actually pretty useful for making predictions. It worked. So we kept on adding to a body of knowledge that at its core was wrong. It's kind of the same with the flat earth crowd. Talking to a flat earther can be a really frustrating experience because once they've come to the conclusion that the earth is flat, they start to see evidence absolutely everywhere. They have confirmation bias, and over time they collect piles and piles of evidence to support an idea that was never true. You see, the human brain simply can't handle everything, so it accepts the information that appears useful and the information that confirms what it already believes, and it pretty much ignores everything else. So once you absorb one lie, one convincing falsehood, it becomes very easy to make a mental fortress out of that idea. You keep collecting evidence that what you believe is true, and you use that evidence to put up walls to protect your idea. Now again, that's not all bad, because you have to pick and choose the information that you're going to keep. And you really don't want to start from scratch with every new experience. If you had to analyze absolutely everything all the time, it would paralyze you. You'd never get anything done. So you want your brain to do this. You want it to build shortcuts. But at the same time, in a world where people are deliberately fabricating stuff, it becomes more and more important to know what you're going to believe and why you want to believe it. We have no choice but to examine our assumptions, and we have to do it more often because we're living in a sea of very bad information. So, let's say you watch a video on YouTube and it's telling you that the government has ordered 100 million caskets because it's going to kill off 100 million people, and then somebody actually shows you these caskets. Now you've got to ask yourself a very important question. How likely is this to be true? I mean, would anybody have a reason to make a story like that up? Is it possible they're doing this to build a YouTube following? And then after that, you've got to ask yourself another really important question. Even if this is true, so what? I mean, let's suppose for a moment the earth really is flat. Now, I don't believe that, so don't run around quoting me, but just for the sake of argument, let's pretend. So what? What difference does it make? Are you planning to go on a space voyage? Why does this information matter? It doesn't. Now, please don't write me letters. I'm not interested in the flat earth theory. I reject it. And I digress. Human beings, tragically, have a long record of being liars. And now we have the digital tools to make our lies seem, well, very compelling. So how in the world are you supposed to navigate this? I'll be right back to take a stab at answering that.
Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we're committed to creating top-quality programming for the whole family, like our audio adventure series, Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a Bible-based program for kids of all ages. Your whole family will enjoy the faith-building stories from this small mountain summer camp and town. With 24 seasonal episodes every year and fresh content every week, there's always a new adventure just on the horizon. Check it out today at discoverymountain.com.
Retirement planning can be a stressful process, but it doesn't have to be. The friendly people at the Voice of Prophecy can walk you through the entire process and explain all of your options based on your specific needs. Whether you'd like to set up a trust for income or make a gift that will benefit your loved ones and change lives through the Voice of Prophecy, we're here to help. To learn more, call 1-800-348-5993.
This is Authentic with Shawn Boonstra and the Voice of Prophecy.
There is no way for a human being to process absolutely every bit of information that pours into your brain. So we have to build models for how we think the world works, because you can't know everything. And the models we build require that we deliberately ignore a lot of information. You've got no choice. You have to pick and choose. So the question is, how do you build the model? What information are you going to choose to help you understand the world? You know, there's an old story about the way they train bank tellers to spot a counterfeit bill. There are so many different kinds of counterfeits in circulation that you can't study them all. So what they do is give bank tellers a real banknote, and they tell them to study it. Turn it over in your hands. Remember how it looks, how it feels. Think about how it smells. And one day when you get handed a fake, you're just going to know it. It's kind of like the uncanny valley. You might not be able to define exactly what's wrong, but you'll know something is. So how do you tell if something is true? You spend a lot of time studying the truth. Now, unfortunately, we are part of a generation that says there is no truth, there is no objective reality. But historically, we need to understand that's a brand new concept, and it flies in the face of thousands of years of diligent human observation. There is a real world out there, and there are things you can count on. You can tell yourself, for example, all you want, that gravity is an illusion. But the next time you fall off a ladder, I promise you will know that gravity is real. There is an objective world, and you can use your senses to discover it and study it. But even then, the sharpest senses do have some limits, and the way your brain works, unfortunately, your senses will sometimes deceive you. Eyes and ears do play tricks. So how do you evaluate the stuff you perceive with your senses? What you need is an outside source of authority. You need a way to step outside your own perspective and see the situation from somewhere else. To accurately measure the universe, you have to compare it to something you know for sure. And here's where an ancient book like the Bible suddenly has some really useful things to say, because it's terribly honest about the limits of human perception. Over the last 100 years or so, we've come to realize that we have some real limitations on our ability to assess the universe. But the people who wrote this book have been saying that for thousands of years. Just listen to this from the book of Proverbs. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. So let me ask you this. How many times have you been absolutely convinced of something only to find out later that you were wrong because you didn't have all the data? I mean, I can be honest enough to admit that I've done it many times. I have forged ahead with arrogant confidence, knowing I was absolutely right, only to be humiliated when the gaps in my personal understanding suddenly showed up. I mean, how many times haven't I said, I don't need a map, I can find this place without one, only to have to get a map when it turns out I was completely wrong. So here's what you have in this book. You have a man who claims to be the Son of God. Have a look at me, he said. If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. And when Jesus finally stood trial in front of the religious authorities of his day because they thought of him as a political threat, they asked him to explain what he believed. And here's what he said. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple where the Jews always meet, and in secret I have said nothing. Why do you ask me? Ask those who have heard me what I said to them. Indeed, they know what I said. And when he had said these things, one of the officers who stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Do you answer the high priest like that? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you strike me? On another occasion, this same man stood in front of the Roman governor and said, Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. And Pontius Pilate responded with maybe the most important question ever asked, What is truth? Now I understand. A lot of people have trouble believing that real truth actually exists. You and I grew up in a generation that was taught to say we should talk about truthiness instead of truth because, well, we all have our own idea of what truth is, and we believe now that we get to make up our own sets of facts. So when Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, it leaves us just a little bit skeptical. But at the very least, you do owe it to yourself to take an honest look. Go get a copy of this ancient book and read it for yourself. Forget what all the religious people say about this because, well, I've gone around the block enough times to know that some of those religious folks you see on TV, they're also in the business of creating deep fakes. They really are. So go to the source. Read what the people who were actually there 2,000 years ago said and see what you find. Because I'm telling you, there is truth, and there is something out there you can count on for sure, something you can believe. And when you find that, you will suddenly have the ability to detect a fake, because the lies will leave you in the uncanny valley. I mean, what if Jesus really did live the perfect life? If that's true, it seems to me that this would be a really good place to find a little bit of objectivity. And honestly, you've got nothing to lose just by looking. I'll be right back after this.
Dragons, beasts, cryptic statues. If you've ever read Daniel or Revelation and come away scratching your head, you're not alone. Voice of Prophecy's free Focus on Prophecy guides are designed to help you unlock the prophetic mysteries of the Bible and deepen your understanding of God's plan for you and the world around you. You can study online or request them by mail. Visit BibleStudies.com and start bringing prophecy into focus today.
Welcome back. It's Authentic with Shawn Boonstra and the Voice of Prophecy.
Look, for thousands of years, the human race had no problem believing in objective reality, that there was something knowable and real out there. And for the most part, most of us knew what that reality was. But now we live in a world full of many strange ideas, and it's hard to tell what's real, what's authentic. Our natural reaction is to throw up our hands and just give up. But at some point, it's going to be important to know the real from the fake. One of the authors of the Bible wrote that Satan transforms himself into an angel of light. So before this is all over, the lies are going to get very convincing. But if you marinate yourself in the truth, there's always going to be something, some little tell from the uncanny valley that reveals the lie for what it is. The time has come to get yourself a real banknote. Study this day and night so that the deep fakes will be really obvious. I'm Shawn Boonstra. Thanks for joining me. This has been Authentic.
You've been listening to Authentic, sponsored by Voice of Prophecy. Remember, you can listen every week right here at the same time. And thank you. Authentic is funded by listeners just like you. You can support at voiceofprophecy.com. That's also where you can find all the episodes you missed, or where you can listen again. That's voiceofprophecy.com.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions? Like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers that you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter the most to you. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.